You are listening to Viewpoints from PlaceCloud. Cultural researchers tell stories of places from around the world. For the full multimedia experience and to support the creators you enjoy, visit placecloud.io.
We're just outside the churchyard of St Paul's Cathedral. St Paul's was the heart of early London. The church was founded, according to the Northumbrian monk Bede, in 604, and was possibly the only part of the Roman city to remain occupied before its 9th century revival. When the Archbishop of Canterbury, a man named Ælfheah, was martyred by Vikings at Greenwich in 1012, his body was brought here for burial, where it was believed to work miracles for the pilgrims who visited his tomb. Now, when the Danish prince Cnut became King of England by conquest in 1016, he found himself at loggerheads with the people of London. He viewed them, probably correctly, as unfriendly towards his rule. They had resisted his attempts to capture the city earlier in 1016, and it's likely that resentment ran deeply on both sides. This is probably one of the reasons why, a few years later, the king hatched a scheme to remove the corpse of the archbishop and transfer it to Canterbury, thus cutting off the church in London from a lucrative source of pilgrim donations. Now, there are two versions of how this all went down. According to the Anglo-Saxon Chronicle, it was a terribly dignified affair, with the new Archbishop Athelmoth in attendance and, in the Chronicle's words, great pomp and rejoicing. There is, however, another version of the story that casts the whole business in a very different and rather more sordid light. According to a monk called Osbern of Canterbury, the removal of Ælfheah's body was a heist, cooked up by Cnut and his cronies and undertaken under the noses of the hostile Londoners. The story goes that Cnut ordered his huscarls, his personal bodyguard, to fake an assault on the gates of the city to convince the Londoners that Vikings were at the walls. Meanwhile, a little gang of men, including King Cnut himself and Archbishop Athelmoth, arrived at the riverbank by ship. Whilst the London garrison was distracted at the walls, they made their way stealthily to St Paul's and crept into the crypt. There they jimmied open the tomb of St Ælfheah and removed his holy bones, wrapping them in a shroud and hot-footing back to their getaway ship, described as a royal longship with golden dragon prows. Now, by this time the garrison knew that something was up and set off in pursuit, but it was too late. Cnut had stationed more of his men at London Bridge and Southwark to prevent pursuit, and the gang made good their escape. Now, whichever way it really happened, Cnut was evidently insecure in London. He kept a fleet permanently stationed outside the city and rinsed the inhabitants for as much silver as he could squeeze out of them in taxes. He can't have been at all popular with ordinary Londoners. Nevertheless, those feelings didn't prevent the growth of a wealthy new class of Anglo-Scandinavians within the walls in the years after the Danish conquest of England. Evidence for these people was unearthed, somewhere near here, a tombstone found in 1852 in the vicinity of St Paul's churchyard. Decorated in the Scandinavian Ringerike style, it depicts a great beast, intertwined with another creature in writhing combat, picked out in black, red and white, traces of the original pigments still detectable after more than a millennium. Down one side of it, a broken inscription explains that Gunnar and Toki had this stone set up. The inscription is carved in the runic alphabet. The language and the names are Norse. The runestone now lives in the Museum of London, a rare and imposing reminder of the new immigrants who are making their presence felt in 11th century London.